Ladies and gentlemen, the rumour mill is swirling at the moment for the PlayStation 5 Pro as well as the Xbox Series XL or whatever it ends up being called. There have been an awful lot of rumours from myself and many others and a lot of whispers that have been circulating around the internet. I think at this stage a lot of gamers do expect Sony and Microsoft to release some type of upgraded hardware. We know of course that the PlayStation 5 Slim is almost certainly coming, and let's face it, cost reduced models are almost a certainty, but upgraded hardware specs, well, I think many are kind of thinking that this is almost going to happen anyway. Curiously, Strauss Zelnick, who is Take-Two Interactive CEO, actually has stated in an interview that he is of the belief that Sony and Microsoft will do just that. So in this video, I want to discuss his comments and also put them into some context, and also what I've personally been hearing, some additional information regarding the PS5 Pro. As you can imagine, we're going to get into all of this, plus some more, after this message from the video's sponsor.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
Firstly, let's get straight into the information from Take-Two. Strauss states that, quote, "We will probably see a PlayStation 5 Pro and Xbox Series XL launch, but the previous generation upgrades, the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X of course, didn't really do much to, quote, affect their business very much." He also spoke on Nintendo, briefly outlining that of course they will continue to support Nintendo's console, which, let's face it, the next generation one will probably be a Nintendo branded money printer as well. This information, by the way, was quotes from gamesindustry.biz. I will of course leave a link in the video description. Now, I don't just want you guys to take the statements at face value, but I think it's important we do some analysis. Firstly, to my personal knowledge, and also judging from reports by Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming, so far third-party studios have not received development kits for the PS5 Pro. In my last video I had gone over some additional development kits which had been increasing in shipments over the past several months, but I think this is likely given the timeframes we saw PSVR 2 related instead of upgraded hardware. There's also NDAs. They are a thing. Now, it's possible that Strauss has been told things under the table, but if he had signed some type of NDA, and bear in mind, I say this as not being a lawyer, I am certainly not an expert in US law, so if you know more about this than I do, please let me know more about this in the video comments, because again, I am not a lawyer, so I don't know the ins and outs completely of NDAs in this respect. But I would assume if he was informed formally about next generation hardware, he would probably at best be able to very gradually hint towards it, which of course is a fine line. With that said, he is the CEO of Take-Two. Frankly, developers in the industry talks, and I think it's likely that he would have a reasonable understanding, and that's putting it mildly, of what both Microsoft and Sony are doing. Of course, plans can and will change. If you've been following this channel for any length of time, you know we've already discussed a number of Sony patents which seem to be for ray tracing technology. This, by the way, is based in hardware. It doesn't seem to be a software technique, which just do not seem possible on the base PlayStation 5. There's also a upscaling tech for machine learning, which seems to be RT technology. Now, this was not a patent, but an actual conference that Sony themselves were hosting, and although it did seem predominantly to be related to film, at least in the conference, it specifically mentions gaming as well. However, before these patents and this conference emerged, I'd actually released my own information based on what sources had confidently told me about the PlayStation 5 Pro, as well as also the Xbox Series mid-generation refresh, and this is well over a year ago now for the PS5 Pro. I believe I've somewhat solved more recently the mid-generation Xbox, which for those who missed my video on this, You can search on the channel for Red Gaming Tech Sabin. But basically Sabin, that's the code name, by the way, of the APU, not the entire console project. But Sabin is basically a cost-reduced Xbox Series X. It relies on newer IPs such as Zen 4 and RDNA 3 and a Microsoft machine learning block. It was a very cool design, actually. Very, very cool. Microsoft and AMD are collaborating a lot, if you believe reports floating around the internet, on AI. So honestly, this makes a lot of sense because typically technology can be repurposed. The AI here, I was hearing, was more for like upsampling and graphics related tasks. I suspect though for the next generation consoles it's going to be very interesting. There's also been other reports online, not from myself, that Microsoft are going to be really pushing machine learning. So for example, voice chat and lots more of other, stuff into Windows. And honestly, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that this is the case anyway, especially given now, of course, that Microsoft are pushing so many other elements of AI. Anyway, I was told the performance targets of the PS5 Pro were 2 times faster in raster, 2.5 times ray tracing by my original sources well over a year ago. Less than a week ago, however, another source told me that they'd been hearing very similar things, but this source also thinks that the project itself has been mothballed. Now, if you watched my previous video on the PS5 Pro, shouldn't be very difficult to find. If I'm a chimp and forget to link it in the video description, it's going to be the previous PS5 Pro video, which is on the channel. But again, I'll try to remember to link this. I've been hearing very conflicting information concerning the state of the PS5 Pro and whether it was actually still being worked on. Now, most of my sources told me that the machine definitely did exist at one point or another. Now, it is very possible that everyone's wrong, including Insider Gaming Tom Henderson. I'm very confident, actually, that at one point or another, Sony were considering the machine. Now, how far they got into the development, I'm not too certain. Now, it's either possible that the project itself is totally dead, but it's also possible that the APU that some of my sources knew about was killed, but some sources still are hearing about the new machine. Now, Insider Gaming Tom Henderson thinks that the console is alive, and he seems quite confident about the information he's received. I've spoken to him a little bit about this in DM, and we were talking, about various things. So it's not uncommon, honestly, that design goals change, projects change, APUs have different revisions. So it can be due to numerous reasons. For example, smaller things like, for example, tech isn't quite ready in time, or perhaps they want to incorporate new tech that wasn't originally part of the plans. Maybe they have cost concerns, maybe something else. So this stuff is not uncommon, and we've seen it time and time again in the gaming industry. But one additional detail I've actually been told about the PS5 Pro is that it seems significantly upgraded, of course, across the board. This is not limited, though, just to the memory system, Zen 4 CPU and RDNA 3 based GPU, but there seems to also be an additional Tempest engine compute unit which was actually considered. Now, officially we know from Sony during the Road to PS5 event, all of this was revealed. Mark Cerny confirmed that the Tempest engine, which is responsible for spatial 3D audio in the machine, is basically a repurposed compute unit. According to Cerny, it was based on RDNA 2 with some changes. Basically, there are no caches and works on the principle of DMA, Direct Memory Access. It works a bit like the PlayStation 3's Cell SPU, actually, which is actually very capable and can do some very interesting stuff. Cerny mentions himself in the Road to PS5 event that they had specifically modified the CU to behave very closely to the PS3's SPU. Himself actually said in the conference earlier that the PS3's SPU, which again is part of the Cell processor, is absolutely amazing for audio, and that it was essentially capable, that is the Tempest engine, of being basically on par with, in terms of performance, of the PS4's Jaguar processor, which is absolutely very impressive. Anyway, the Cell itself was notoriously difficult to fully maximize. In fact, in some ways, Microsoft made a probably better decision going with their design. The Cell was amazing, it really was, but it was also very difficult to get to grips with. We saw some incredibly impressive stuff from teams like Naughty Dog, But yeah, especially early on, the Xbox 360 was just much easier to develop for. But anyway, funnily enough, there are actually some white papers which were published back in the day. These are, of course, quite old now. You can Google them yourself. You can search for Cell SPU ray tracing. And folks there were experimenting with primitive ray tracing technology running on Cell CPUs. There's even some videos, I think. Now, this, of course, is different to the PS5. Now, someone told me that the PS5 Tempest engine can actually run ray tracing calculations for graphics as well. Now, this does make sense on the surface. Both the Xbox Series and PS5 basically use RDNA 2's ray tracing technology. This essentially is kind of a repurpose of the TMUs, the texture mapping units of the GPU, to run intersection testing. Now, this stuff is quite technical, and I've gone into this much more extensively on the PC side of things back in the day with RDNA 2 when I was leaking a lot of the details of this upcoming GPU. But basically speaking, the ray tracing units of RDNA 2 basically run ray box and / ray triangle intersection testing. This essentially is whether a ray hits something in the scene or not. But BVH traversal is run using compute shaders using SIMD32. Now, what this basically means is that when you actually have a scene, it's in some type of hierarchy, and all of the objects and stuff like that are kind of put together in all of these different boxes. And then as the rays get thrown through the scene, you have to essentially sort which rays are touching what, and it's very computationally intensive. The fact that you have to run that BVH traversal on compute shaders using, again, the compute units of the GPU is a weakness of RDNA 2. Now, this is present on the Xbox, this is present on the PS5, and also RDNA 2 based GPUs. Now, from what I understand, the PS5's Tempest engine can essentially run or help with some of these commands. It's also why the Nvidia and AMD have gone quite separate ways for their GPU architectures, but that's a topic that I've covered on more PC related videos. Now, you can actually calculate 3D audio, and it can actually use rays to do this. Nvidia have a similar technology which uses VRWorks, which uses optics ray tracing. The same theory, by the way, executed very differently, means the TE can do the same thing. I don't have enough details on the finer levels of this, though, frustratingly, but given the TE basically is just a compute unit with some modifications to essentially act more like the Cell's SPUs, according to official information, it does make sense. Now, I want to stress, I cannot verify this, so do not take this to the bank. This is not Mark Cerny himself giving me a DM, so it could be misinformation. However, I do think it's very likely, given the official information, plus also if you do some Googling around on how this works. Interestingly as well, not only do we have the fact that Nvidia have done this, if memory serves, there was also an interview I conducted, I think it was like in 2018-ish. I believe the chap's name was Nunu Subtil. I probably mispronounced that, I'm sorry. But you can search for it on the channel. I just googled Red Gaming Tech Nvidia audio interview and it'll pop right up. I'll try to remember to link it. And I believe, I'm not 100%, but I believe he also was talking about ray traced audio and how you can do very similar things. So it's quite an interesting interview. If you want to get into the weeds. This, of course, is older information now because it was based on RTX 20, which, of course, is much older than what we're running now. But anyway, getting back to the point, as I've somewhat diverged even from the script, my guess is that if the Series XL, whatever the hell it's going to be called, does launch, it's going to be after the PlayStation 5 Pro. The rumor is that Sony's first-party studios get the dev kits the next several months, and then of course the third-party devs get them after that, and of course the system will launch. That's according to Tom Henderson, and to my knowledge, no first-party or third-party studio has PS5 Pro. I could be wrong, but that's my personal understanding. I think, therefore, it's possible we would see Microsoft launch their console after that, probably giving them the hardware advantage like the Xbox One X. Now, a big reason I'd heard that Sony were canning the PS5 Pro, and again, I've heard very much conflicting information. I want to be honest, I don't know which way the pendulum is going to swing, whether it's going to get released or not. I'm hoping the PS5 Pro does get released, because I think it would be really cool, but obviously, I don't make the decisions over at Sony. But I'd heard that it was going to be very expensive. I'd actually been given some reports of $600 to $700, and given what's going on at the moment, that's a lot of cash. It also, though, kind of isn't, given the amount of money people are willing to spend for iPhones, that type of thing. And I think that a console which would be capable of multi-bounce RT, higher refresh rates, better resolution, higher, I think it could be really cool. With that said, if you also look at the time period between the Xbox One X and Series X, for example, it's not really exactly long. Like, it's only a couple of years, so I don't necessarily know if, it's going to be late 2024 that the console's going to release, and therefore 2027 is going to be the date that, at the earliest we're going to see the PS6. I also said that in my previous video, I kind of heard some and speculated on some of the specs of the console. Based on what I'm told, I think it's probably going to be 8 Zen 4/Zen 5 CPU cores with some level of customization, RDNA 3 based, but heavily tweaks to maintain backwards compatibility. I think there's probably going to be some elements of RDNA 2 in there. Not that GPU IP means a damn crap anyway for console stuff, because it's just the capability. Like, they take stuff away, they add stuff. It's just, yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. So I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 workgroup processors or 60 compute units is probably accurate, but this is pure speculation. I have not been given a spec sheet yet for the PS5 Pro. Video game industry never stands still, but I think right now we're in a very pivotal time. I think that a lot of folks expected perhaps the PlayStation 6 onwards to no longer be a physical generation, but instead something more like just a streaming service. But honestly, I don't think this is going to be the case for quite some time. I think the next generation Xbox, the next generation PlayStation will almost certainly be physical hardware. And so it's going to be very interesting how Sony, Microsoft, and all these other companies manage to keep up with the hardware demands. At the end of the day, everyone is always wanting better visuals, better experiences. And so I think we're in a very pivotal time at the moment, because even in the PC market, there's a lot of frustration, especially in the lower end range of GPUs. I will also be very curious over the next year or so, now that we've gotten rid of the cross-generation phase, especially let's say with the PlayStation, to see exactly what these next generation machines are capable of. I think that the Xbox and PlayStation are really going to give us a much better understanding of what their systems are actually capable of in terms of physics, graphics, and just generally a more open world, and can really leverage the I/O systems on those consoles. I'm also very excited to see what Sony, as well as Microsoft, plus all of the third-party developers, of course, are going to be announcing at their respective conferences. Let me know, by the way, down below what you're expecting Sony, as well as all these other companies, to really announce. I think that, well, there's been so many rumours, but I'm trying to keep, personally anyway, my expectations down a little bit. I have to say, the new Mortal Kombat is looking really good. I haven't really played fighting games in a long time because I got somewhat addicted and just playing them way too much, but maybe I'll pick up the new Mortal Kombat because it looked really fun, and I maybe just play through it for the story purposes. I think I went through maybe 10 or something like that. I can't remember if it was 9 or 10, just for the story. It's zany, it's insane, but it looks damn fun. So let me know, guys, what are your expectations, over the next coming months. And yeah, with all that said, thank you very much for watching the video. Take care of yourselves, have an amazing day. Bye for now.